Hello and welcome back, everyone. It's just another day in the life as a military wife, and the 2020 year has come to an end. And to wrap things up, I'm going to cover my year in books. So if you want to get some recommendations, find out what I read this year, what I think about what I read this year, stay tuned. As always, I am your host, Sam Wolf, and you're listening to Life of a Military Wife. So joining me for this week's episode is my favorite coworker, Baby Cuteness, is snuggling with me right now. And okay. So let me give you the parameters. That was off topic, but let's focus, buckle down. I'm going to focus here. The parameters on what I count for the books I read. I read quite a few articles, research articles, different things like that. I'm not including those. I read picture books to my kids and poetry to my kids. I don't usually count those. What I am counting is novella or novel length literature. That's the premise. And I do count rereads. There is one or two books I read every year. I reread them I just love those books. I love them. And I was trying to find more balance in my reading this year. I talked about it at the beginning of the year, but I was trying to do the Scholl Sisters 5x5 challenge to diversify my reading a little bit. And I do feel like I got a bit of diversity in my reading. But as you will shortly witness, the vast majority of my reading is fiction. I'm trying to increase my nonfiction, but like I said, most of my nonfiction is articles, research studies, things like that, which are shorter length and I don't include on my lists. And so I'm going to go through everything I read. Not going to give a whole lot of detail at first. And then I'll go back and I'll hit some things. There's things I'll hit in a block. And then I will give you my top 6 because I tried to pick a top 5 and that didn't work. And then I'll give you the ones I really would never go back and read ever again at all. And I'm really grateful that I just got from the library instead of getting it. So libraries are wonderful. I really love Libby and I love Audible and I love that Spotify now is also doing audiobooks. I've got some audiobooks on Spotify as well. So, I originally had the goal to read a whole bunch of professional books. That was one of my 5 categories. And of all of the books listed on my professional improvement list, I read 1.5. So, definitely room for improvement in that category. The second category I gave myself was classics. And in the category of classics, I read half of them, but I then picked up a whole bunch of other classics as a result because they spurred my interest in that area. The next category was read aloud with the kids. And I pretty much hit that category straight up, and our read alouds really improved this year, largely because of a book I will be discussing, and I have discussed in the past. Then in addition, my husband signed me up for the Year of Sanderson. I particularly am a fan of Brandon Sanderson, and as you are about to see, the majority of the books I read this year can be attributed to 3 authors with a sprinkling of a few others. So, not gonna lie, that was a whole category. And then my reread section, and I hit my rereads just fine because, like I said, there is one book in particular I read pretty much every year. And there's a second book I reread most years. And it's just because I find them really motivational. So I will get into that in just a second. But let's just break down the list. And Hobbit was one that was on my classics list, but I think we're going to end up doing it as a read aloud next year with the kids. Although my kids are starting to read it on their own, so maybe we won't do it as a read aloud. But okay, Hobbit. Here's the next section. I realized I couldn't criticize the Wheel of Time TV show, which I didn't end up liking at all, if I hadn't read the books. So I read all the books. I read all the Wheel of Time, and I didn't have that intention at the beginning of the year, but I read all the Wheel of Time, including the prequel book that came out later. So that's New Spring, Eye of the World, Great Hunt, Dragon Reborn, Shadow Rising, Fires of Heaven, Lord of Chaos, Crown of Swords, The Path of Daggers, Winter's Hearts, Crossroads of Twilight, Crossroads of Twilight, Knife of Dreams, Gathering Storm, Towers of Midnight, and Memory of Light. So those were great books. There's some wonderful character development. There's a lot of plots. There's definitely parts I absolutely did not like. But overall, really great stories, really wonderful character development. I'm glad I read them. I'm glad I have that now. So I have that knowledge base when I'm discussing things. So the next one is a nonfiction. It's called The Price of Time, and it's about inflation, and it's about not inflation exactly. I know this. Anyway, it's The Price of Time. I'm blanking on the term, but anyway, it was a really great book. I enjoyed it. I don't think it's a good fit for anyone. It's really economically heavy, which is not a subject I am obsessed with, but it's one that fascinates me, so I enjoyed it. The Four Loves by C.S. Lewis. Oh my goodness. You all know how much I love that book. I did a whole episode on that book. I love that book. Dawn Shard, Fellowship of the Rings, Arcanum Unbound. These next ones, I'd read some really, really mentally in-depth, like really mentally taxing, or at least just brain power heavy books. This next section of books are ones that are, not ones I'd go back to. The Favorite, The Elite, The Selection, The Heir, and The One. And I found them because I saw a pilot for The Selection, and the pilot was intriguing, and I don't know why I kept reading them, but I kept reading them. Yeah. Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, that was a read aloud. The Lost Medal, the Read Aloud Family. That was on my professional development category. And oh my goodness, do you all know well, maybe you don't, but I did a whole episode on that one too. Love, 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 love me that book. The Hiding Place, The Bacta War, Hercule Poirot, I'm going to say it right. The Complete Short Stories, God Smugglers, Mysterious Case of Rudolph Diesel. That was a surprise. Magician's Nephew, Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe. So here I'm going to get into all the Narnia books. I'm listing those now. Magician's Nephew, Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe, Horse and His Boy, Prince Caspian, Voyage of the Dawn Treader, The Silver Chair, and Last Battle. Those are all read alouds with the kiddos, specifically over the summer. Tress of the Emerald Sea, The Frugal Wizard's Handbook for Surviving Medieval England, Yumi and the Nightmare Painter, The Sunlit Man, Taliesin, Merlin, The Genius of Israel, Lost Metals, Cytonic, and Seven at Sea. So anybody who listened to my list last year will know that there are definitely some repeats in this list. Things that I've read before. And just to name a few, not all of them, but just to name a few, I have Hobbit, Fellowship of the Ring, Harry Potter, Lost Medal, Hiding Place, Bacta War, Hercule Poirot, God Smuggler, Magician's Nephew, Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe, Cytonic, and Seven at Sea are all ones I have read previously. Seven at Sea is one I discovered last year, absolutely loved, and have it might end up being on my yearly reread list. And I don't actually end up rereading everything on my yearly reread list. But I do end up rereading most of those. But the one I read every year, and I do. I go back to this every single time, is God Smuggler by Brother Andrew. That book is so compelling to me, and I think part of it is I love the fact that he had this military background, that he had this I can that I can understand and relate and sympathize with where he's coming from. I don't completely understand it all, but I love seeing the transformation in his life, seeing all of the struggles that he had and how he overcame them. And you know what? One of these days, maybe I will do an entire episode on that book just because I reread that book every single year. And not only do I reread it every year, sometimes I reread it multiple times. It's not a very long read, it's not a very long book, but it is powerful and it is motivating. And I feel like it helps motivate me to want to continue improving and becoming the best I can, the best version of me. And then Hiding Place is one that I reread frequently, but I wouldn't say I reread every year because I'm not sure I have. There may have been a year I haven't reread that one. And then Seven at Sea it's just that one's just good. It's just good. And the one thing I think is fascinating about some of the rereads, especially the ones I just mentioned to you, The Hiding the Place, God Smuggler, and Seven at Sea are really wonderful, compelling narrative stories, but they're all real. They're true stories. The narrative story in them is fabulous. The storytelling itself is fabulous. But I think part of the reason why I just go back to them is they're true stories. They're people's real life. And because of that, I find it really motivational. So that's my personal take on all of those. Let's get into some. Again, I'm grateful I reread, or sorry, I'm grateful I finally sat down and read Wheel of Time. I've had friends recommending that series to me since college, and I just never ever put it on my list. The Pendragon Cycle, I know, I just started it. That's what Taliesin and Merlin are. That's the first two books in the Pendragon Cycle, and you're probably thinking, Sam, why are you doing that? Why are you picking up another really intense fantasy series? But I guess I'm a glutton for punishment or something. But the Pendragon Cycle, I've really genuinely enjoyed. There are parts where I get particularly ticked off at certain characters, especially um well, anyway, there's also the other reason why I picked this up is I have to take a break from those sometimes. But anyway, whole reason why I picked up the Pendragon Cycle was because there is going to be a TV show adaptation coming up, and I saw the promo stuff for the TV show adaptation, and I really loved the production scale. I think the costuming and the sets looked fabulous, but I wanted to understand how accurate it was to the story, and the only way to do that is read the story. So I'm reading the story. So I'll hopefully finish the rest of the Pendragon Cycle next year. Year of Sanderson was super fun. If you know the authors to the books that I listed, you will realize that the bulk of my reading this year has been from Robert Jordan, C.S. Lewis, and Brandon Sanderson. So I'm going to try to get a little bit more diversity in the authors I read. I did branch out. I branched out a little bit this year, and I did get some new people in there. And that's where I'm going to hit now. I'm going to hit my top 6 because of course, and this is my top six favorite new reads for the year. I've already talked about the rereads I do all the time because they're favorites. Here's my new reads. The Four Loves. I have read a whole lot of C.S. Lewis. I love me some C.S. Lewis. He's my man. I have been a fan of C.S. Lewis and Dickens ever since high school. And The Four Loves was a book of his I had never heard of. I had heard of The Problem with Pain. I love that one. The Screw Tape Letters. Love that one. Now I'm blanking. But I've heard of a lot of his other ones. But I had never heard of the Four Loves. And then all of a sudden I found out there is a whole ton of C.S. Lewis I had never heard of. He had written a whole bunch of books that nobody ever talks about. So I probably will go down a C.S. Lewis rabbit hole again next year. And forgive me if I do, but I do love me some C.S. Lewis. I'm not going to lie. And part of the reason why I'm picking the 6 books I'm picking is because they're the ones that I loved so much that I did episodes about. I just found myself naturally and organically just talking to everyone about these books. Seriously, I think my friend group, it might be a little done with hearing about how much I love some of these books. But when you like something, you like something. And when you love it, you share it with friends because why not share what you love with people you love? So, my next on my highly recommended new reads for the year is The Read Aloud Family. And I love this one so much I did a whole episode on it. I think reading out loud to children is crucial and critical, but reading out loud in general is just very good. And even if you're just really reading out loud with a friend or reading out loud with your spouse, go for it. I love reading to my husband and having my husband read to me. We will do that for stay-at-home date nights. And so I think the Read Aloud Family was really great. I love that it has some really fabulous book lists in the back of the book. I think those are great. I'm always looking for a good book recommendation. So, and that's where we get into the next one. The Mysterious Case of Rudolf Diesel was, I heard an interview. I don't think I would have ever picked this one up organically. I don't think I would have ever seen it on a shelf and thought, oh, I need to read that because it just doesn't seem like my speed. But I heard an interview by the author about the book and was really captivated by the way he presented it. And it ended up being absolutely one of my favorites this year. I have talked about it so much. And just because it is a historically based book, this is a factual book. It's not a fiction. This is nonfiction, not fiction. And I didn't know about Rudolf Diesel, the inventor of the diesel engine. I didn't know about his life story. I didn't know that he grew up in Paris and was German and had 2 of the most powerful men in the world at the time angry at him, the Kaiser Wilhelm, the leader of Germany before World War One, and Rockefeller. And just the fact that he disappeared mysteriously and the lengths that the author went to try to determine what happened to him when he mysteriously disappeared. It's a really, really fun read. My husband ended up enjoying it too. It's one we both ended up reading, and I may or may not have talked about this a little bit, but my husband and we are both nerds. There are both things where our reading tastes overlap, but we also diverge drastically. So this was one where we overlapped, and it was a really enjoyable thing to be able to talk about with him. And we got my dad intrigued also, and my kids liked listening to the audiobook. They found some of the historical parts rather fascinating as well. So the next one is Tress of the Emerald Sea. And oh my goodness, I think this might be my favorite Brandon Sanderson novel ever written. And if you know anything about Brandon Sanderson, he's written a few things, quite a few things. But he ended up explaining that the whole premise behind this, it was during the COVID lockdowns, he had extra time because he wasn't traveling as much. And they sat down and watched Princess Bride as a family. And his wife loves the book and they are talking about it. And the whole thought was, what if Buttercup had gone in search of Wesley to find him? And that's just what planted the seed that ended up becoming Tress of the Emerald Sea. And it is fabulous. It's in his Cosmere universe. Brandon Sanderson has lots of different stories. We've currently embarked upon the Alcatraz series with our children, and they are loving it. I've not completely been there for all of the readings. That's why Alcatraz versus the Evil Librarians did not make my list, because my husband's been doing that read aloud with the kids. And so I can't count it as a book I have read all the way through. So yeah, that's a thing. But that's a completely different universe than his Cosmere universe. But even if you've never read anything from his Cosmere universe, Tress of the Emerald Sea is a great, just fun adventure story. And he wrote it as a gift for his wife, and she loved it and wanted to share it. And so that's why it ended up getting published. And the rest of the ones from Year of Sanderson were also part of that sphere of things. They were gifts he wrote for himself or family or whatnot. Anyway, the next one is The Lost Metal, which again is a Brandon Sanderson book, but oh my goodness, it was an amazing payoff. I did not really love the first age of Mistborn, which is again part of the it's part of the Cosmere, but the second age of Mistborn I absolutely loved. And the final book in the second age of Mistborn is Lost Metal. And I never realized that my OCD could be a superpower. And one of the characters in there uses her OCD to be a superpower and saves the day. And I loved that. That just, chef's kiss. Totally loved that. That spoke to me. Maybe it might not be everyone else's thing, but it spoke to me. And then the very last one I just finished is The Genius of Israel. And this book is a little atypical, nonfiction, of course. You could probably guess that by the name. But this is every chapter covers a different aspect of the Israeli culture. And it's a really fascinating read. And there is specifically a couple chapters because Israeli military service is compulsory for most citizens. It is. So there's a couple chapters, there's quite a bit of stuff about how the Israeli military functions, and there's certain aspects I did not previously know about the Israeli military that I found rather fascinating. And considering everything going on in the world and whatnot, I might be hitting that. I might be revisiting that later on this coming year. Or yeah, I don't know, but I'll probably revisit that. But if you look at my faves for this year, my top fave new reads, it's interesting because it's a really good balance between. Did I write Lost Metal twice? I wrote Lost Metal twice. Oh, I'm so sorry, everyone. I was just looking at my list. I'm like, oh my gosh. But it's a really good balance. My top 6 is 3 fiction and 3 nonfiction. So I think that's pretty good. I think that's pretty good. And then also I just went through and realized I had done Lost Metal twice, which messes up it. But hey, 52 books in a year. I read 1 book approximately each week this year. So I'm pretty proud of myself on that one. My goal was 25. I think I met that goal. Just maybe. But okay. That is my year in books. I will probably put my top 6. Yeah, I'll probably put my top 6 in the description, as well as links on where you can find them if you are interested in doing so. And yeah, I think it's funny that Brandon Sanderson got 2 in my top favorite this year. But in all in defense of C.S. Lewis, he's in my top. He's in my top 6 this year, as well as the fact that I have read a lot of C.S. Lewis previously, so it's hard to find something new of his. But I usually love it when I do. So, as always, I hope you guys, tell me how, shoot a comment to me. Let me know how your goals went this year, what books you read, what was your favorite book you read this year? Put it in the comments. Let's get a conversation starting. Let's give each other some wonderful ideas of books we can read in the coming year. I am working on my list. I'm going to do the 5x5 challenge again. So I am looking for 25 books, and I need myself a 25 starter list. So shoot me some really good recommendations. I want them. As always, I'm your host, Sam Wolf, and you're listening to Life of a Military Wife.